So, our conversation today is going to be on pain and trauma.
My name is Shelley, and welcome to my podcast, Love Unmasked.
I speak on the importance of love and self awareness. I share guidance on how to rise above a pain and baggage that holds us back, and how to use our life story and our past experiences as a source of information for strength for today. I have with me a friend from back in the 70s. We went to school together, a church school together in Chicago.
Yeah.
She's younger than I am, but we were same school and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important that we talk about pain, because pain it's a universal experience, and it does not discriminate.
Right.
It doesn't matter how young, how old, well, seasoned. It doesn't matter if you're homeless or educated.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. It hurts. The intensity and duration may be different for each other, but pain is something that we should talk about, pain and trauma. And today, let's tell them our story,
Okay.
our truth, our past pain, and how the Holy Spirit helped us to overcome
Yes.
our trauma. So I know you as Mimi, and you will always be Mimi to me. So just before we get started and dive in, just share a little information about yourself, your name, and where you live. Just a little information.
Okay. Well, my name is Meridia Henry. Most people know me as Mimi. If you've known me for about 20 years, it's Mimi. But my legal name is Meridia. And I live here in Huntsville, Alabama. I work for Oakwood University. And I have my bachelor's in psychology. And I'm finishing up my master's in social work.
Okay.
So I have 5 children in every generation. So my children range from 39 to 16. And so, that's just a little bit about me.
Okay. So our earliest memory of pain. I grew up with a family of total of 7 of us, and I was next to the youngest. So my personality type, I needed attention, constant attention. I needed affection, and it was just I needed love a certain way.
Right.
And when you're in a family, a big family, and my dad was in a wheelchair, so my mother did a lot of the physical work, going out, doing the physical work. So her having time to sit down and, let me perform and, constantly, oh, here, let me hug you, and just attention that I needed.
Right.
I didn't get it. And so at an early age, I had a misguided attempt to get attention when I was 10, I took a handful of pills. And so I had this play in my head that I would wake up, I'll be surrounded by family and friends, and then they'll tell me, how much they loved me, and, not to do that again. And so that was my beginning of darkness in my life. I had a fun childhood, don't get me wrong, go outside and play until the sun goes down. You come in when the lights come on outside. But that love, that need, that acceptance, the way I needed it. They were giving it to me, but it wasn't the way I needed to receive it. So what is your early memories of your first dark place or pain or trauma that you experienced?
Okay. From my earliest memory, my first memory, honestly, that I can recall is a fire that we had in our apartment. And all I remember was the house was in blaze, and the fire department had to come in and remove us from the apartment. And right after that, we were dislocated, as far as family and where to go. And so we had a favorite aunt who, she was a foster parent, and she had 2 children of her own. And we went to go stay with her for a short, brief time. And I do remember it being a lot of kids, same age brackets, male and female. And my earliest memory of pain derived from that source, being all in one bedroom and some physical. At the time, I didn't know what sex was, so I didn't know what was happening. But I remember being asleep, laying on my stomach, and someone laid on top of my back and forced my hands down and began to move with their pants down and my pants down, panties down. I didn't know what that was. I couldn't describe it. I didn't know how to feel about it because, as you know, Shell, back in the day, we did not think about emotions and things. We didn't have that voice at that time. And so I thought it was normal, even though I didn't like it. And that began a long years of validating me. But that was my first memory of it.
So, did you talk to anyone about it? Well, I'm saying that, but I know, like you said, we swept things under the rug. What about a sister or something? Did you didn't feel comfortable?
It wasn't a matter of comfortable.
You just didn't know what you.
I didn't have no idea how to verbalize that. We, like you, were born in a very strict home, religious. We talked about the love of God, and of course, like you, we had fun and memories that can last you for a lifetime. Right. However, I was a child of 5 also, the next to the youngest, and so I experienced some of what you were experiencing. Just didn't feel love associated with what I felt love was or what I needed. And so we just didn't talk about emotions in my family.
Right.
We didn't talk about things, if we were having a bad day at school, that's not
what
something.
Did we have bad days? Right. Did we get stressed? Did we even know what stress was?
Didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue, but that's how we were brought up.
Right.
The conversation was not, we just didn't have
it just wasn't talked about.
Right.
We didn't have someone to compare that experience with
yes.
and say, hey, this happened, or, because it was something, it was taboo. You just didn't discuss it. And half the time you didn't even know what was going on or what was happening or anything like that, So then it because it's a new experience, it almost silences you in a way.
Yes.
So if it happens again, it's, then it becomes, what do I do?
Right.
What do I say? And I know for me, at 16, I was 16 when I had, experienced where someone raped me.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing was I didn't talk about it. And I didn't talk about it up until this year.
Mm-hmm.
When I was talking to my daughter about it.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Mommy, you were raped. But I didn't look at it like that because, on his side, a close friend and stuff. And it's just like, what do you say? Who do you go to? And then that was after I had, experience with, having a child by a married man at 15, an older man. So,
What did you just say?
right. What do I say? Because once I had the child, then I went through a period where no one was allowed to talk to me,
Oh, wow.
including, my friends. And, Shiloh, those were your friends. The same people went to the church, were your friends in school. So I went through a period where they were not allowed to talk to me.
Right.
So I don't know if their parents told them that or if they made that choice. But the thing was, it didn't matter because it wasn't going to change the hurt and the pain that I was feeling because I'm 15. It started at 14, but now I'm 15 when I have a child. Now he's married. And I'm the cause of all of this. I'm told I'm the cause. So when that happened to me at 16, I definitely was not going to say anything to anyone because now, and he knew I wasn't going to say, he saw my vulnerability and he knew I wasn't going to say anything because I was taught that parents didn't discuss things like that around us and we did not know who to go to. And so that baggage, that pain, I carried with me,
Up to a year ago. Wow.
So a year ago, and I literally, to be honest, I blocked it out. And when I went through this transition, so to speak, when I went to a really dark place, and then I was like, wait a minute, this is stuff that happened to me back when I was 15, 16, and I'm still sitting up here, whoa, it's me, and I'm still crying, and I'm still saying, why didn't they love me, and, why was it my fault? I was 15, just all of this, and I'm like, half the people, they're not even living anymore, and I'm still carrying this pain. So I started writing down everything, everything from childhood that brought up a memory that wasn't pleasant. And I wrote it all down, and I was just sitting there writing it down, and I was crying, and then I would write more, and then I came up with I don't know, legal paper, like 4 or 5 pages of hurt, what I felt someone did to me or something, and, all of that. And then I cried, and then I said, Lord, I give it all to you because I've tried what I knew how to do, and we're still here with this pain, and it hurts. And I sit right here in this floor, and I tore it up, I threw it in a pot, and I burned it. And so I prayed, Lord, help me. Help me, this darkness, all of this is blinding me. And Mimi, I promise you, within a week, I woke up and I was like, and I was just like, why am I happy? And I was just, just going through my day, and I was like, I feel good. What is it? He had taken away all of that baggage that I was carrying, and me thinking I was not worthy, and it's like my identity, my worth, all of that was identified in him, but I was trying to find it in you, in this person, in this man, in this boyfriend. But it took all of that and all of these years for me to acknowledge and be aware that the love is inside and it comes from him.
Yeah.
And there's no one else that can give it to me like I need it. And I didn't understand that. And so that's why I want, I just think it's good that we can sit here and just share this, our story, because I want other young ladies to know that talk about it.
And as you were saying, Cheryl, my story is much different because, my abuse happened on a daily basis for about 16 years. And it was not until, and the same thing, I'm asleep, they would come into my room, force me down. I had began, these are signs that they tell you, mothers need to know this. Early signs of incest are children that are very terrified of many things, loud noises. A lot of times, one main thing is that you would wrap yourself so tightly in the blankets, like a cocoon. And so by the time the person gets you unraveled to be able to touch your body, hopefully you wake up. And so these are early signs that I've always told parents, when they have young children, look out for these things. Sometimes you will sleep in your closet trying to, hide so the person can't find you and, continue to abuse you. But I didn't know that word abuse. Of course, we didn't know that word abuse, but I knew something was happening to me. I hated it, and I thought that it happened to all girls. And I did not know, Shell, until I was a sophomore in high school to put a name and someone telling me that was wrong. My mom had sent me away to Bravio Academy, and it was a all-white school. And it was my first time being away from my family and away from the abuse. And I remember sleeping a couple of nights in my dorm room and just watching how girls were with each other. They would like doing their hair and being pretty and stuff. And I hated being a girl. I, believe it or not, I used to dress like a boy. I used to wrap my breasts because I hated when my breasts came in puberty. So I would wrap my breast with an ace bandage very tight. I wore boy caps and, peed like a boy, to be honest with you, for many years. I hated being a girl.
So was that a protection for yourself that, okay, if I, change that, then no one will violate me that way?
No, it was really because I thought, being a girl, this happened to you. So I didn't want to be a girl. So I guess I was trying to be a boy. And
I'm curious, so that went on a really long time. Even though you did not like it, did it confuse you in any way, thinking this is how I get attention? Did it ever get did it ever get to a point where, because I've heard, talking to people, I've heard where things become a habit, and it may be something they don't like. And so they're focusing so much on what they don't want that that's what, what draws. And so people don't understand. They're like, this happened to you. How can you be mean to someone like that when they were abusive in how they talked to you? But then it's a learned behavior. Did you were?
Yeah, but I really felt that if I could change being a female, that this wouldn't happen to me. But when I went away to school, and I saw how females were acting and they weren't acting like me, I just burst out one day and asked, y'all like big girls? And they were like, oh, yes, yes, yes. And I said, literally, true story. I said, so when they come in your room and do this and this and this to you,
Oh, wow.
You like that? And that was the first time one of the young white ladies said to me, that's bad. That's not good. That's wrong. And I said, something wrong has been happening to me. I had no clue it was wrong. I just thought it was normal. From my first memory of life, I always remember this happening. So I had no clue, Shell. And she went and told the dean, and this is in the early 70s at this time. She tells the dean, the late 70s. She tells the dean calls me into her office and she asked me to explain what I was talking about. I told her in detail what it was, who it was. She just looked me in my face and she said, Meridia, the next time that happens, you say no very loud and it won't happen anymore. And I went home. She didn't call my mother, didn't tell my mom. I went home for Christmas holiday and I was sleeping in my old bed with the old people in there. And
You got power now.
man, that person came in my room and I felt them peeling away the covers and I woke up and I turned around and faced the person and I said, no, no. And it stopped it. However, it didn't stop the lasting effect of all of that because I still had no understanding of what was happening to me. I knew it was wrong now. And so, but the Lord is good because when I was away at Broadview, there was a pastor there. His name is Pete Neary. I owe my start of my healing to him because he was the first person that talked to me as a person. You know, I was disturbed. I was a very violent person. I became very violent, very abusive to animals. And I was a dark soul. I was in dark places, and I didn't understand why. My mom used to say to me as a child, why are you so evil?
Right.
Why are you so angry? And I didn't know why. I didn't connect the dots. I didn't even know the dots were connected.
Right, of course.
And girl, he would talk to me saying that this was an outward expression of something that has happened to me. And this Pete Neary, honey, he peeled away the onions and taught me that God loved me anyhow. And I just couldn't believe that. Like, I did these things. Like, I hit people. I was violent. He still loved me. And once I found that out, I started talking about what has happened to me. And in the many, many, many years of me talking to people and telling my story, the peace has come with now I think I have an antidote to freedom from that, and that is telling your story. Because the more that I tell it, the more healed that I am, the more free that I am. And I just did not know.
But it's really a great thing for you to talk about it because it's going back to something like someone being sexually, assaulted or something. And so when we watch TV or something and somebody come forth about some celebrity or something, and we're just like, oh, we love him. Oh, she's looking for her 15 minutes of fame. Oh, she's looking for this. She wants to get paid. And sometimes we can be their worst enemy, and they're trying to come out and say, I'm hurting. This happened to me. And all we're looking at is who it is. No, we like him. Oh, you had to know what you were doing. You had, and then other people start coming out because one person came out and so they see support. They're like, okay, now I can tell my story. And then it's like, now I can tell my story. And then we come together. But it takes that somebody coming out and being attacked or or something, but then other people will come out, and we need to support them more instead of making them a victim all over again.
All over again. And that's the norm in society. Even if I've been involved in many people who've been raped, work for Oakwood. Somehow this thing always falls in my lap. Women, I can be in a public room, I can be in Walmart, I don't care. The Holy Spirit will strike up a conversation, and I'm like, I see her, and it's like, I feel the same sense that she's gone through and I'll just touch her and say, I know this happened to you. How did you know? Man,
you know that pain. You've been through it.
Yes.
Your past, your experience has molded you into the person that God has created you to be for a purpose He has for you. And we can take our experience, it wasn't a great experiencing it, but He has taken all of that, the good, bad, ugly, and it makes you that unique person. And so when you come around someone that experienced something like that, you see them. And we need someone to see us.
Yes.
I just needed just anybody to come and say, Michelle, you're okay.
Yeah.
You were still a child. You didn't know or understand what you were doing. I did have one elder come to me, and his name was Pastor Bolden. I'm not Pastor Bolden, Elder Bolden.
Brother Bolden,
yes. And so he came to me because by then I was sitting in the back of the church.
Right.
And
like that.
and so I was sitting in the back of the church. My mother had given me permission to sit in the back of the church. And so again, that brought her more pain because I thought she was telling me she was embarrassed for me to sit with her, but that wasn't the case. But then I thought it was because I was starting to show and everything. And so she was saying, because my family sat about 4 rows from the front. So I would have to walk all the way to the front. And she was giving me an out. You don't have to walk down the aisle, and But I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't embarrassed to walk down the aisle because I didn't know I was supposed to be embarrassed. It was only until I learned that from them that this is wrong. This is wrong. This is bad. This is So I was sitting in the back of the church. At first, I started in the balcony, but I went and sat by a friend of mine in the balcony, and she got up and moved. Now, if she'd left out and pretend she was going to the bathroom, it would have been okay, and I could have played it off. But she got up and she moved.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, I didn't get the memo that they're not talking to me anymore.
Right.
So then I had to go through that, and it was the worst pain, that I experienced. So I started sitting at the back of the church, and people would turn around and they would call me names and say things and stuff. I never told.
I remember. Believe it or not, I remember.
And I never told my siblings that I was going through this. I never told them that they, because I don't want to. I've already put my family through enough. And so I remember Brother Bolden coming to me, and he said, I see you. And he said, keep coming to church like you're doing. Because he was letting me know it's God, his spirit is going to help me get through this and be faithful and diligent with him in my relationship with him. And I will get through that. And so just the fact that he said something to me, and he was an adult, and he wasn't saying something about, pointing, and I remember I was just so overcome with emotion that I couldn't say thank you. I couldn't, or anything. I just, and then I was thinking later, it was like, well, where else am I going to work? And I'm thinking, but later I was like, he was a godsend. I needed him at that time. And that gave me more strength to just keep moving on. And I did get to thank him. I was at a restaurant and I ran into him and his wife. And so I had the opportunity to tell, this was probably 10 years ago or something, some time ago. And I told him how much, just by his presence and talking to me, how much that meant to me. And, I felt accepted. I felt, just that little bit right there did so much.
And let me interject too. Let's talk about church for a minute. Because even though my incest had happened so many years, for about 16 years, right after that, I experienced too, my very first time being with a guy, got pregnant out of wedlock, and again, that shame that came over what I had did. And, I was very active in my church as a young person, very active, always up front. But when I got pregnant, of course, the church told me, you can no longer do anything. I was even told not to come back to church because I was a disgrace to the Lord. And like you, I didn't know anything. My mom, God bless her, but, I got kicked out of the house. So when I got kicked out of the house, here I am with an infant. And back then in 19, you were still a child. You were still a child. And I was living in a shelter. I didn't even know what a shelter was. But my mom took me to this place. And there were a lot of women at this place. And I was there in a twin-size bed with an infant. And I didn't know anything but what I was taught. And I remember praying to God, praying to who my mom sang about, prayed to who I've been reading about my whole childhood life, and asking them, was I a disgrace to you? Did what I do disgrace you? Am I an embarrassment to you? And I remember the first verbal words that the Lord spoke to me was that no, I was not a disgrace to him. He still loved me. And I could not believe that again. You love me? I was told this by Pete Neary, but now I'm hearing you say to me, you love me, and that I wasn't a disgrace. And so, honey, like you, I sat in the back of the church because that's where I was told to sit. But when God told me that, I literally that Sabbath walked right up to the second pew, right behind the deaconess, and I sat down in church. And I remember the deacons coming to me saying, you can't sit here. You have to go back and sit in the back. You are showing now, and we cannot have that in this church. And I remember very loudly saying to them, this is not your church. This is God's church. And I have heard from God that I am not a disgrace for him, and I will sit here. And Shell, guess where I sit in church to this day?
Where?
Right behind the deacons. To this day. Every time I go into a crowded room, I sit the second row from the front. You will never push me to the back of the church.
Yeah, I do. But the church that we attend together here in Huntsville. You were in the front. You're right there.
I will always be there. But I want to tell you this, Shell. It was so much ugliness and darkness with sexual abuse at that time in our churches. Those incidents happened so often with deacons and elders and pastors. And I remember once a pastor had, came to me and fondled my breasts. And I remember I'm going to tell, because that's what they tell you, I'm going to tell. And I told my mom, and I told well, couldn't tell the pastor because he was the pastor. But, you know, and I was told I was a liar. Like, how could I try to disfame a pastor's name? How dare I, you know, mention that? And I remember looking at this pastor in his face, saying to him, you know, and I know, and God knows the truth. And I'm okay with that. Are you? And thankfully, that pastor did go and get some help and did apologize for what he did to me, which was new. But it was so much of it. It was so prevalent at our church.
And again, this is why it's important that we talk and generations coming up behind us. I always quote this about King Solomon in my videos, but he talks about there's nothing new under the sun. What has happened will happen again. And he makes the statement about why is it that future generations are not able to learn from past generations.
Especially in this.
Especially in something that's like this. And the thing is, if I, you know, in a relationship where, you know, say I'm in an abusive relationship where someone's beating me or you know, toxic relationship like that, then if someone shares that and talk about it, then you know that that's not the norm. If they come from a family, that's what they see, then they're more likely to accept that type of abuse because they see it growing up and they think it's normal. So we need to tell our truth, our experience, and not be ashamed because we're not, that doesn't define us who we are. And so future generations can learn from our experience because I was silenced literally for what, 45 years. My voice was silent because who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to, who's going to listen?
And you know what, Shel, all these years later, I mentioned earlier that I'm doing my master's in social work. And I'm doing it at Oakville University. And one of the classes that we are taking right now currently is called Advanced Sexuality. And this is the first time, from a Christian perspective, this is the first time in church type environment that we're talking about sex, abuse. And I'm surprised, I'm so happy. Here I am in my master's, okay, smacking at 60, and we're just now talking about this. Guess what I just found out?
What?
There's a book, you know, of course, you know, being Adventist, we hear of Ellen White. Would you believe she has a book on this?
No.
Sexual abuse.
Oh, I've never seen that book.
I've never seen it either. My mother is an avid reader of Ellen White. All of the testimonies have said on her cover. I've never seen and heard from her, but I have the book because I had to have it for class. But in here, she talks about God's disgrace of people who abuse people sexually. And had I known back then from the Word of God and from Ellen White that he was displeased, because I went through a period of time where I wasn't raised around a father. So the only idea that I had about a man who was considered God, he was a man, I had problems with that. That's why I was so angry. Because I'm like, how could you be a God so loving and watch this, and as they tell us, allow this to happen? It took me years to understand that this was not him doing. It took me years, but I didn't know that. But in there, she talks about how, you know, how really tender God is about how this abuse affects these women. And I could not believe my ears. Literally now, I'm reading this.
Because if you don't address it, if you can't move past it, rise above it, it goes into your next relationship. I didn't date. I didn't
Yes.
date for a long time.
Agree.
I didn't date for a long time. It affects how you love your kids.
Mm-hmm. Say that. It affects how you love your kids.
I
Yes.
So my daughter Tisha, who I was carrying through all of that,
Mm-hmm.
then I struggled like my mother raised her.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went off to school, it was the hardest thing leaving her.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, I wasn't sure, how do I love her? You know, I was just like, back then I was still wearing ponytails. And you know, and I was just like, how do I love her?
Mm-hmm.
How do I love kids?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I, you know, subsequently ended up getting married and was about to have my first child, then I said, Lord, you know, how do I love this child? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds crazy, but I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be distant or, you know, it's just like you're going through a routine and there's no real love.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the car and I was praying
Mm-hmm.
and I heard a voice that said, love your child
Mm-hmm.
how you want it to be loved.
Girl.
Whew. So from the day he was born, I was like, my child. I was hugging him, I was kissing, I was all in his face smiling and I love you.
Mm-hmm.
I love you.
Mm-hmm.
Every night, you know, kiss goodnight, you know, so I was loving him the way I wanted to be loved. You know, he probably have a different way he loved, you know, but that was the key.
Right.
And so, and that's, you know, how it is with my daughter now. We have a really awesome relationship, even though my mother raised her. You know, we went through a period, we talked about it, and, you know, she needed answers. You know, she had questions and everything, but we're like super close. It's like when I need to talk or something, it's either her or my son, one or the other, you know.
And I did the same thing, you know, but my expression of love, I smothered over, I overprotected my son. He couldn't go
nowhere.
You had to be
I don't care how close they were. You were not going over.
And I used to teach him, nobody is safe. Nobody is safe. And so that type of love him and I often talk about and then he was my confidant, you know. As a child, I disclosed all of this information to a child. So it was heavy. And I poured that on his shoulders of guilt. And so him and I too, now, you know, he's about to be 40. And we literally talk so much about unraveling even the unhealthiness in our relationship in the past. Although we don't regret it, you know, because God used it anyway for healing for him and I.
Right.
And he just had him a baby boy. And so being from that position, able to love him freely without the baggage was something I didn't get to have, but it has been a joy watching that. Right. We get a kick out of it now, like, oh my goodness, that child won't have that baggage. But coming up, you know, I didn't want him to have any of the experiences I had.
Right.
But because I didn't know anything else, I gave everything to him.
Right.
And that suffered and you know, that was unhealthy too.
Yeah. You put a thought in my head when you were talking about they can't go anywhere and that protection that they have. So I know one thing with my mother, I felt like suffocated. Like, and so it was her protecting us. We weren't allowed to go and spend a night. You can come over here, but you cannot go over there because she knew what was going on. But even though she didn't talk to us about it, she knew what was going on. So she would always, you know, can I go here, mother? Can I go there? And she would always, it was like, no, no, everything was no. And so I just started, it's like, sorry, sisters and brothers. I started sneaking out. Because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't, so that was the beginning of me sneaking out and, because I thought I found someone, that's now giving me that attention, giving me that affection, accepted me and gave me the approval to be who I needed to be, even though it wasn't a healthy, thing, but for me, it was worth sneaking out because it was the attention and the acceptance that I was getting. It was something I really, really needed. And so I thought, again, back then, I thought my mother didn't, love me. She's got this tight grip.
Yes.
And back then, I was let me be free. I wasn't a 9 to 5 person, do this, do that, it's just, let me do this. And then, oh, hey, look there. Oh, and that structure, she's a very structured person. So we struggled. Yeah. We struggled a lot, but she was loving and protecting me the way she knew how.
How? Let's talk about
that. The best way she knew.
You believe that parents come into the world with a manual, but what I found out in therapy was they can only give from what they have received. When part of my mother and our relationship is that I look at the cup that she had and I see what she poured into me from that cup. I'm like, okay, Mom, you were off the chain, the best mom in the entire world, because she didn't get that poured into her.
Right.
And I saw a relationship with God, and to this day, not from the Word of God, but my mama used to sing these songs, these hymns that talked about nobody understands like Jesus. I didn't know what she was singing about, but when trauma hit me, honey, now I'm like, that's what. So it began as an adult, calling Mommy back, saying, Mommy, what were you singing about? Right. And then listening to her traumas from her past. And I can now look back and say, she was loving me.
Right.
Like, she only knew how. But what she gave me from what she got was, you're talking about making lemonade out of lemons?
Right.
Oh, honey, she made some lemonade, but it took.
But we don't understand that growing up. We don't see it, and that's why I talk about using our story, our past, and for information, and give us strength and understanding for today. Because too often we're still blaming people. We still want to say, well, she did this,
so this
or
is
this is what happened. But then when I have these conversations with my mother, and I was like, oh, you experienced that. I have to ask her questions, because she's not going to be just forthcoming with me, And then, you hear about what they went through. And then you're like, oh my goodness. It's like, and then you're just like so thankful for what they did. And
that's where
and what they sacrificed for us.
Yes.
But we don't see it and understand it coming up.
I went to see my mom a couple of weeks ago, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to help her understand that her sacrifice, anything that I will ever be, anything that I've ever achieved, I like when I graduated, I had a painting of my mother on my couch. And so I told my mom, I said, Mommy, when I walk down the aisle, I don't want them to see me. I want them to see you, because she was supposed to go to Oakwood, but she got married. And the picture that she sent to Oakwood to get into Oakwood, I used that picture and put it up there. But I mean, until we really understand an open dialogue with our parents and our kids. I'm still raising children. I got teenagers still in the household, and so now I'm able to show them, but yet express to them the whys of why no is important and why this may not look like, it may look like this is safe and pure, but it is not. And utilize that. And, there's going to be a level that they don't understand because they're teenagers.
But the explaining
The why
because
is
we
key.
were told, just do this,
Just
do
do
as I say. And that was it.
And that was it.
And you didn't
get to express.
you didn't
understand.
you didn't know the end result of what's gonna happen, or you didn't know anything. You just like do as I say. You couldn't talk to your friends; they don't know more than we going through the same
That's right. That's
thing.
right.
And back then, you didn't really. We didn't have the television to learn. They were sleeping in different beds back then, on TV and stuff. So I know there's a lot of information out there, but you still have to be careful with all that's out there. But it's good for me now when I sit and talk with my mother, and so it explains and gives me understanding her thought process and her why, and it gives me more insight. I remember there was an incident where I went pretty much most of my life not thinking my mother loved me. I'm be honest there. And I remember there was an incident, and we were at her house for Thanksgiving. It was some event. We were all around the table eating, and I remember we had a discussion about something, and I don't normally say anything. Like, I usually sit in the back and I don't say anything. But this particular time, I decided I was going to use my voice. And I was just voicing myself, saying, you all need to stop listening to a kid saying, it's more to it. She's only telling you what she wants you. She's not giving the same. You need to, And I remember my mother getting really upset with me, and she didn't realize she was cutting up something. And then she, it was like, Michelle, you don't, and she was just, yelling at me. You don't know how she is. You don't know Tiffany is this, blah, blah, blah. And it was some girl that was staying with her. And so all I could see was the object she had in her hand, and her, fussing, just saying that. And I was so embarrassed because we did have guests that was there. And so I didn't say anything the rest of the day. And we left. My son was with me. And we left. And we got in the car, and my son said, Mom, that's deeper than whatever that conversation at the table you all were arguing about. He said, that is much deeper. And he was right. And so it was like, maybe I was like, I'm never talking to her again. I'm never, I'm mad and I'm angry, she don't love me. And 20 minutes later, I was fine. I was just I can't stay angry for some reason. I've tried. It's just not my personality.
Yes.
And so I remember later having a discussion with my mother and having a talk with my mother. And from that day forward, that whatever that was deeper was resolved. And she actually now says she loves me. It took a little, at the beginning it was a little uncomfortable because she never said it before. And so it was just kind of like, how do I receive this? And, so she, says it more, then she, hugs me now, and, but it took that, and it took us to step back and be aware of how we were interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And then that was resolved. And so, we were at a good place after that,
And you do have to take those moments. And I think God sets those moments up just to bring that resolve out. I was in counseling once, and I was talking to my counselor about an incident that happened between my mother and I. And, the counselor suggested that we bring my mother in. And, wow, I was like, but she's not going to come. My mom never talks about anything, so it's not going to do anything. And man, she came in there and had a good therapist. And she, kind of asked my mother several questions, whatever. But in the process of her asking her questions concerning me, she saw that my mother had a deeper wound and that something was blocking her ability to be able to be expressive about her emotions and stuff. And she started telling my mom, I will fight for little Christine. And my mother never heard that. Somebody recognized there's a little Christine in me. And it was so, it was so revolutionary in how I saw my mother at that time. I saw her as a victim. I saw her as a wounded, person who never walked through the process of therapy.
All that baggage.
And man, from that eyesight, I started going back saying, okay, mommy, now this and this and this happened. Tell me where your mindset was and how did we, and to this day, this is what we do. To this day, if I have a thought process, I say, Mom, I tell my mom all the time, if I got to grow, you got to grow. So as I learn and get better at understanding the connections between these ugly moments that have happened in our lives, guess what? You're going to walk this walk with me. And she has always been forthcoming since then. I don't care how ugly it was. She always is like, I really didn't mean, but she was stuck. And some areas still stuck in this place of not knowing how to, express those things of what happened to her.
Right.
But, I encourage everybody, go to counseling, get a good one.
Right.
Go to counseling. Get a good one. But go to counseling because some things are going to remain stuck and you will carry it throughout your childhood, your adult life, your married life, like you said, parenting your children, relationships.
So, relationship. How, did did you, when it came to when you were married?
Let me tell you something so strange. After when I was 16 and I said it to the dean, the next person that I said it to was on my honeymoon night with my husband. And I remember him sitting there. He didn't judge me. He didn't act surprised. He just said, okay, I'm going to call your mom and I'm going to call the person who did this to you. And he did. And he informed my mother that it happened to me. And he told the person that did it to me that he was going to take his wife to therapy. And whatever I needed, they want to give to me as far as helping me through this process. And so when you talk about, relationships, I was very, you either go one way or the other. You either become very frigid and you don't have relationships, you don't date, sex is disgusting, to going all the way over to being promiscuous. Well, I didn't want any part. It took me so long to learn that sex was created by God. That, you could be loved and touched and it was not ugly. It was not nasty.
You could have considered me having my first child. That was like a chastity belt.
Yes.
I was like, it was like, no. I was like, what's her name? Morgan Trainor? No. What's your name? No. What's your son? No. What is it? Megan Trainor? What is that song? No. But because, after I had my child, then there was this men started calling, people from my class were calling, people calling, can we have a threesome? And I'm just like, wait a minute now, just because I had a child, you think that means I put it out to everybody? And so this again, so then I started looking at myself like, wait, am I carrying myself away that same, And so people in my brother's class calling me, just everybody calling, like asking for some. Like, is this okay?
Yeah.
It's not okay.
And it's so funny because for me, it was like an open door for all the deacons and elders that wanted to do their thing. Oh, that gave them an indoor because I would never be believable now. You know what I'm saying? I would never be believable.
Right.
You had a problem because you had a baby out of wedlock. So it was your issue, and I could never, ever convince anybody that the other. However, I will say this to you. After I had my son and the pastor had, came on to me, and I told, and I'm sitting in the room with all the pastors, the deacons, and elders, and Elder Scott.
My stepdad.
Yes, your stepdad was in the room, and the pastor kept saying, well, she's the one who had the child out of wedlock, so I'm a pastor. Of course I didn't do that, but she was probably, misguided in her affection toward me. This happens all the time. And Elder Scott was the first one to speak up and say, I call her honey and sweetheart, and she doesn't have a misguided affection toward me. And that started all the other deacons saying the same thing. Well, wait a minute. And Brother Abernathy came forth, and he was like,
to speak.
I call her Honey Bunch, and and she doesn't have a misguided, And the resolve of that issue was that his wife actually came into the room, and she said I was not lying, and they knew I was not lying, and he knew he had a problem, and he needed to go get it fixed, or it was going to be exposed to everybody.
Yeah.
And so.
So you bring up a point like, okay, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So he worked at the school. So he knew you weren't lying because he done ran up on some things working at the school, because there was a lot of stuff going on there at the school a lot of stuff that I found out later in life. I was like, that was going on there?
Well, I knew it was going on because I was a victim of it. Well, I didn't know it was going on with almost
everybody.
I don't know anybody that went to that school.
So I know a teacher that was with one of a girl that was in my class. And she actually, at this time, she actually was younger. She, you know how your birthday staggered off and you were able to get, she was actually 13. And she had a relationship with one of the teachers there. And so I remember her telling me, and I was like, no, that's not going on. They don't do that. That's how naive we are. And I was like, no, they don't do that, And so she was so happy about it because someone was accepting her. And I remember she said, okay, I'm going to prove it to you. And so she was telling me, she said, we meet at such time. Down in the stairway when they go down there in that back area back there, and she said we go there and we meet there at such and such time. And so I went early on. I was hiding out, and I couldn't believe it. And so she ended up actually spiraling out because she really thought he loved her.
Right.
She really thought, she ended up getting into drugs and just different things. And then I think about it, I was like, what could I have done? Yeah, right, Michelle. What do you really think you could have done, But I do remember at the time, because this was before I got into my entanglement. And I remember telling her, that's not right. That's not good. You shouldn't, I remember telling her to stop doing that, but it gave her so much acceptance, and she felt, seen. that she would not let it go. And then
It just
come to find out, he was banging so many people. And so when
yes,
she found out that, you know, it wasn't really a love, what we thought we knew love was.
and some of these people, meant to this day, have never had to face. Those conversations are in dark.
And that's why
Us talking
vengeance
once
is the
is the
Lord.
Lord's. Because some of them, still to this day, you know, are
And I know
known as
it's
dark
it's
members.
bad, but sometimes I want to see them get their vengeance. I want to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because it's like, you know what he's doing, but then you let him go to another school, and then, you know, the things are still happening.
Still happening.
And now you think, even with all the information that's out there, we still have a lot of, you know, naive people out there that don't know that it's going on. And then you have a professor, an instructor. He can look into a room and he can know who's vulnerable. As soon as he started, they're so good at it, recognizing.
They call it what do they call it? Pruning, grooming. That's what they call it, grooming.
But
they are so good.
They can see
who I can touch and who
you know,
I can't.
exactly, and they know they need that attention, and then they start that bonding and, you know, talking. I actually did a video on college life with a couple of students, and, you know, just kind of giving them tips of be aware, because I was talking to a lady who was 40 years old, and she didn't realize that there were professor students in college going on.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, if you don't know that, what about these young, tender
people,
17-year-olds going into college?
And that's what, like on Oakwood campus,
You have no shame saying what.
on Oakwood campus, you know, and it's not just Oakwood.
No, it's all over.
But I try to inform. You know, part of my goal once I get my master's, part of my goal is to create a preventive measure in not being a victim. People don't think that there are preventive things that you can do to not put out that you could be victimized. That's inwardly. And those types of things like self-esteem, making parents aware of emotional gaps that are in loving their children and making sure they see, wow, my child doesn't feel love. My child is not receiving love in her own language. Once you feed those things, that child is built from within. But because of those gaps, like with you and with me and with so many other women, people can look, men who are perpetrators can look and say, I see an unmet need. And they meet that need and they got you. And that's part of what I want to do. I want to create an avenue where I'm explaining to little girls and their parents and boys, because don't be surprised that this happens to boys. And theirs is even so much deeper because, you know, you think we feel shame. You know, in their world, it's even more shame.
Exactly.
But building
now, you do know, I know you said when you get your master's, then you do know your experiences, your master.
Honey, I'm working on these books.
You do know that, right?
They are definitely in, I've been doing this since I can remember. I've always been a writer. And so I have 1 billion books, literally, beginning and not finishing. But I am really now, you know, you've inspired me to even start doing more now, actively now. Forget waiting. That's just going to legitify who I am to some. But my experience has taught me so much dealing with, you know, even the girls at Oakwood, when they come into my office and they begin to talk, and I'm laughing like, Lord, why does this keep falling in my lap? This is what you're supposed to be doing.
That's it.
And so I've always done it, but now I will be doing it not only for vocation, but for ministry reasons also.
Right.
And I cannot wait to start opening up these doors. So don't be surprised if you see me
Oh,
on the
absolutely.
podcast. Thank you, though, because I promise you, this needs to be done, and it is not done in our churches.
Right, right.
It is not done in our churches,
Yeah,
and we
I
need to
know.
start
I
busting those doors in. And
I know.
start
I've
these
been
talks.
busting. I've been knocking on the
Yes,
door. I've been
yes.
doing some of everything,
Yes.
trying to actually, you know, Oakwood. That's where I have, passion with, because that's where I went to school there, and then I finished at A&M. And so I've been trying to get on with Oakwood and share my story and talk to the young ladies there.
Yes.
And I haven't yet been able successfully.
I
I was told no, and I was like, no, and they gave their reason why, and I was like, no, I'm not trying to fix anyone.
Right.
God, Holy Spirit is the fixer. I'm just, telling my story. So awareness, because you can't start making changes if you're not aware. If you don't have that understanding, it's just to be aware that you're loved, aware that you're worthy.
Yes.
Because if you don't think you're worthy, you lose confidence in yourself. Your self-esteem goes down, and just so many things that affects your decision making and your career, and it's just so much.
I became a what they call it, my son calls me that all the time. I always want to save everybody, to the point where my entire life has been built around trauma.
A rescuer?
Yes, a rescuer. Honey, when I tell you, I would be so 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
People were at my door. It was like I was a therapist and I didn't have any papers to prove it. And it was funny because my therapist, one of the best therapists in the world, actually.
Communicate with them.
But I disclosed so much of that in my life that I didn't live another life. My entire life is about trauma.
You didn't have a balance.
I didn't have a balance. And my therapist told me, I guess it was 2 years ago, he said, Meridia, because when I got my degree, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this work and I'm going to become a therapist. And he was like, no, don't do it. And I didn't understand it. For this is what I'm supposed to do. He said, Meridia, you will minister for the rest of your life. Don't do it as a vocation, because it will consume you. And it was. And I never did. I've done nothing in my life. Literally nothing in my life. I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't done anything. My entire life has been wrapped around. I couldn't even be a good mother because I was having other kids at my desk saying, okay, Mom, this is what happened to me. And so it really did consume me till I started suffering with anxiety. And once I started suffering with anxiety, it slowed me down to a point where, wait a minute, what's going on? Why is this coming about now? And a long life of trauma, now that I understand it, started me having severe anxiety. I mean, where for the last couple of years, I was not able to even function outside of, medication, literally.
Right.
And so now I'm like, okay, God, now where's my balance? Because I learned how to say, okay, I got a good therapist, here you go, and pass it off versus always being controllable. So now I'm going to look in front of it and see.
And you can see more clear your purpose and everything, because, I couldn't see my purpose at all. All I knew was I always had a passion, a desire to help others, but I couldn't see how to help others because I had to help myself first. I was too busy trying to, I couldn't see past that beam in my eye. And so once I was able, the Holy Spirit started working with me internally, then I started, like, my lens, I could, start seeing. I was like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And so I always liked talking, even though I went so many years where I just took the back seat. You know, as more and more of my identity and who I am started to come out, I remember my sister saying, I didn't know you could talk so much, you know. And the more of who I am, because my identity was camouflage. That's why I came up with the name Love Unmasked, because who I truly was not coming out, because it said just be silent, just you do your work, look presentable. You know, and so I went through that. I was going to make a point. I lost my point. You know, but that purpose. And so once I was able to see how to help myself, then I was able to say, oh, I'm going to do this. I want to do that. And so I wake up all the time.
Yeah.
It's on my mind. I want to speak to these young ladies. I want to talk to, and I go to sleep thinking about it. I wake up thinking about it. And so that gift, so to speak, gift, you know, my mouth is part of my gift. And so somehow all of that, you know, the enemy found a way. We're going to silence her. And so I was silenced. I remember when we were in grade school. You remember we used to have to write lines?
Yes.
And so I remember I used to have to write lines like 1,500, and I will not talk. I will not talk. I had gotten to the point where I would have like 4 pencils in my hand, and I was like on the lines, you know, trying to write this. I'd be at nighttime, I have a flashlight up under my bed, you know, writing lines, and constantly I had to write lines saying, I will not talk. I will not talk, when I was in 4th and 5th grade. And I talk about my son because he's a talker too. But I didn't realize how much of my identity, who I was silence. And I imagine that part of your identity and who you were at some point were, you know, but it sounded like you never had any trouble speaking up.
I do. And you know, it's so when I talk to a lot of women, the one thing that I know now is an antidote is talking. I don't know where. I always say that the Lord placed inside of me this voice, and He always knew that I would talk. I didn't understand it because I couldn't shut it up. I would be accidentally sitting with somebody, and here it comes out of my mouth almost before I want to. You know, just that vulnerability of talking about it consistently and just telling them everywhere I went. And I will still continue to do that. But I do know that my freedom came in disclosing what happened to me and being very intimate with what happened to you. You know, some rape victims that I've talked about, you know, they'll talk about being raped, but they don't talk about how they felt about what was being done to them. And that's one of the hardest things to do. But I have seen women free themselves by starting to talk about not the act, but how did you feel when he pushed you over without talking? Just pushed you over like a rag doll and just have his way with you. How did that make you feel? And when you start talking about that, it's out of your mouth and it's not housed inside of here where it literally affects. I'm just reading today how it affects your physiological being, your psychological being. All these things are wrapped into one. And so when I start doing this and keep telling people to talk about, I'm going to force you, not force you, but I'm going to make you so comfortable with my ugly story that you will look and say, wait a minute, I can say this out loud. And as they dare to start saying it on the tip of their mouth, you see a breeze of freedom, like, I can't believe I said that. And that is the best feeling to experience and go through with somebody. And I've had the privilege of doing that time after time after time. Sometimes I laugh at the fact that, God, I didn't like being in the position but I sure do like seeing the freedom part of this, and seeing people be freed from something that bounds you in such a way that you can die and still be bound. And that is one thing I don't ever want to experience with anybody. I've had people say on their deathbed to me, I used to take care of elderly patients and until their death. And finally, they're tussling and, what's going on with you? Talk to me. These are your last breaths. Get it out. There's nobody in here but me and you. And for them to just breathe that off and then take their last breath. Thank you, God, for sending. So there is goodness after the ugliness, There really is. There really is. Things that you're doing now. Shell, I've known you. I've known you my whole life. You are very nonverbal. And to see you on a podcast,
I know,
talking about the most vulnerable things, I am so proud of you. It does good to my soul to see that happening. So I'm excited.
well, and that's why it's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like once I was healed internally, I just want them to know, others to know.
Right.
Until you let that baggage go,
Let it go.
until you rise above that pain and find a way and understanding
is the key.
that understanding
Yeah.
that,
Mm-hmm.
forgiving, the individual I was talking about earlier, came to me, asked for forgiveness, letting that go, because when you don't forgive and you're holding on, you're still holding on to the past.
That's true.
And you can't see your purpose. You can't clearly see your purpose. You have an idea of, I want to do something like this.
Right,
you
right.
can't clearly
You can't
see
clearly
it
see it,
because
yeah.
you're still looking back at the past and holding on
Right.
to how that made you feel,
Right.
what they did, somebody wronged you, But it's time for us to, at some point, we have to take accountability.
Yes.
Because at some point, the decisions we're making it now.
That's right.
Mama, daddy, them. They're not, we need to be accountable for what we're doing. And I just want our youth to be aware,
Right.
and start taking steps, positive steps, and let go of that negativity that we were taught. We were told no so much. You can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, this, now, when I say that, I'm just saying in general. Because, my dad, he was like, you can do anything, there was no, you can't, because he was in a wheelchair and he had faith, like unbelievable faith, which is how him talking to my mother and, giving her guidance and things and different things. 7 of us, we lived in a low income hood.
There you go.
But we all went to a
Church.
church school that, they paid for, and everything. So, there's so much positive, there's so much to look at, but we're so, growing up, we focus on the negative. Even when, I remember when I was saying, I'm getting married, I'm having 2 kids, and then I would say, but I'm not going to marry a fireman. I'm not going to marry a policeman. You don't focus on the what not. And why. And my reason for not was because, I saw that it was a job, high risk jobs. And, I was like, I want to come home. But still, things we need to start, just our thoughts, change aware of how we speak.
How you speak.
Don't say what I don't want. What do you want? What does your future look like? What's your vision? And start looking at the positive of what you want and not focus on that negative.
Yeah, it's so funny. My 16-year-old, if you were to ask her right now, what do you want to do? She has her life like wrote out and planned at this age. And so many people discourage her from saying, oh, you don't know, life is going to get in the way. And I tell her, don't let that discourage you.
Yeah.
If you want this, go for it.
Right.
And, so often we're told, like you said.
Yeah, because I had a lady, a teacher, counselor.
Mm-hmm.
So once I was kicked out of school,
Yes.
booted out of school,
Yes.
then I had to go to another school, which was totally foreign,
Yes.
because all I knew was the church school.
Right.
And I remember talking to the counselor, and she asked me what did I want to do. And so at the time, I love watching and have an interest in people. And I said, I'm going into psychology. And she said, Black women do not.
To psychology.
And so,
Wow.
so I know I've told this on other videos, but I listened to her.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to Oakwood, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was lost. And I was just like, I signed up, I don't know, something, I don't know, administration, something that I don't know. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I just know I just love people. And I just, sometimes I go out and I just watch them.
Yes.
But even though I did not go that route that I thought I wanted to go, my life experience
Took you right back to
and me being silent and watching and learning people, I can talk to someone and within less than 5 minutes I can tell you a lot about them. I can tell you they're in pain, and I experience pain. I recognize it. I see it. I know it.
Yes.
I lost my daughter, 4 years old. So I know. I see it. And so even though I didn't get that degree, my experience
Is your degree.
my experience,
I wish you
my
would.
life experience, my past story, and the Holy Spirit working with me is going to happen with my degree.
Yes, I can't wait to see
But
on the other end of this, what God is going to
you're
do
going
with
to do
this.
great things because you're helping your brothers and your sisters. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and we fail to remember what you're doing. Whether it's good, bad, Christ lives in everyone. So you're doing it to Him.
That's right. And then being able, I was speaking with you earlier. Because I want to do my very first podcast. I promise you it will be this, of me talking to men that have been abusers, because there's no voice for them either, and even though my heart will always go to women and what we've experienced, but there's a story that begins in everybody, and some darkness that has been inside of them, and not being able to even have an avenue to talk about it because the world would look at you so shamefully. How can you forgive yourselves? And it's so funny because I speak with my abuser often. We're very close. And that dialogue, as we were talking before I came here today, it's beautiful because I'm able to talk with him about what was going on in him, to allow him to do that. And then what was going on with me. And that type of conversation, nobody's having that conversation. But it does interest me. And understanding, for me, understanding. And this person was a child also. And so, they were mimicking again what has happened to them. And so I do have an interest in that, but I cannot wait to see.
So I think we're going to need to have a part 2. What do you say? Because I think we need to dive in
deeper,
and like how this, you have how many kids?
I have 5 altogether.
Your pain, your trauma, things you went through, how did it affect, any of your kids? Go a little bit deeper in that, how, I think we should do that.
Yes.
And, so
Yeah.
I'm thankful. I appreciate you
Oh, no problem.
taking the time and
problem.
telling your story. And one thing we need to remember is we all have a story, and it's important. Everyone's story is important.
Yes.
And no more sweeping it under the rug. And yeah, let's get our truth out there and our story out there so we can start helping others so our future generations can start learning from our experience and our lessons learned.
Yes.
Because you shouldn't have to be raped. You shouldn't have to be in an abusive relationship where, a boyfriend is controlling you, beating you, or something like that, and you don't know what is that. You don't know what's going on. There's so many things that people are experiencing out there that their story needs to be told. And so I want us to continue this so they can feel a trust, a safe environment, a safe place where they can talk about it. They can come to us, they can come to you, or they can find that safe person that they can go to instead of holding it inside. So,
before you finish, I will tell you this. Working in Oakwood, because so many people were coming to me, I had wrote a proposal for the president. And it's so funny because every time I think of something innovative, as soon as it's like the Holy Spirit gives it to me, I share it, and it's revolutionary, and that person doesn't pick it up. And then literally right after I share it, I see it out in the world. Somebody else has done it. And I was telling Pastor Pollard actually about doing what they call now telehealth. And I was telling him in my experience with people who've been raped or people who've been molested and things like that, most people don't like to come forth. And so I wanted a way of bridging that gap. And I started talking about what if we opened up, open lines where you're talking to someone where they don't have to be sick. Because this is a very intimate conversation. Most people can't do this. But what if there was a first bridge and you can build a relationship behind a spot where you're not being visible? And now COVID happened right afterwards because he was game for it.
yeah.
But COVID had happened, and so we couldn't do it at the time. As soon as COVID happened, I saw what I was talking. I still have it all written down.
Yeah, because that became huge.
It's
because
huge.
We were shut down, so they had to find a way to have that community.
Given me that.
He gave it to you.
And my thing was, I told him.
He didn't say you had to pass it on.
I told him he did not.
He didn't tell you you had to.
I told him the word was invest. That's what the Holy Spirit gave me. That you have to invest in this because this is at the early stages. But we were going to reap the benefits from this becoming big. Well, the world got that, and they went, and that became the biggest thing during COVID was counseling. Through the phone or through via text.
Through the phone and all that now.
I cannot believe so. But that's one thing too that has become very helpful. And I'm glad there are many places now that have that service up. Now we do have that at Oakwood now, where people who have been harmed or go through things. We have a whole system now at Oakwood now for that type of help. But before we didn't.
I used to work at a hotline years ago, back in the 80s,
Wow.
for a very short period of time. It was a hotline for suicidal victims. And I worked there, I don't know, maybe a month.
Wow.
But I couldn't do it. That, it was, it really,
it's a lot. You have to be.
Yeah, that takes a special.
It takes a special type of person. Yeah.
And that just was not. And I immediately was like, nope, this is not.
But you get your passion.
Yes. And I just hear the phones, and I'm just like, wait, I'm supposed to, hear them out, but I'm sitting here boo-hooing with them. It's like, no, that's not how you do it, Michelle. So
it's true.
Yeah, so is there anything else you want to share with the viewers before we
Nope, just look forward to seeing you all on different podcasts or even on my own. But I do want to thank you for having me over. It has been my privilege. I've never done this before.
Mine too.
But it's been a privilege. It's been a blessing.
Just to sit here and talk with you and to talk about our past and not be overcome with emotion.
Yes.
Because, sometimes they just the floodgates open up.
I was looking for some tissue, like just in case. But
Exactly.
That's healing, though.
So exactly.
And here's something funny. We were at the same school at the same time, going through the same type of thing.
And I did not know what you were going
We did not know.
I just knew you were angry about something. That's all I knew. But I did continue to talk to you because that's one thing that I learned from my experience. I never shut anyone out because I know what it's like, and regardless of what they're doing, it doesn't mean we have to be best friends or anything. But I see them, and then I understand there's a reason why he's doing or she's doing. There's a reason there's that anger, and I look beyond that, and I always,
which was very few because at that time,
I was like having a scarlet letter, like
don't talk to her.
Do not,
and that's why I guess my passion comes because I've lived on both sides. I was abused. And not that I physically abuse, sexually abuse somebody, but physically.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I was
verbally.
that girl. Yeah, verbally.
Physically.
And physically, yes. And so I did understand.
Who are you trying to fight as tiny as you used to be back in the day? The wind would blow and you would be knocked down and you were trying to fight somebody.
Everybody. That was hard. I used to walk down the street and just punch people that I didn't even know for no reason.
You had that anger that was trying to come out.
Anger, and I didn't even understand why. And so that's why that portion of this, as the abuser, I want them to be able to, I want people to put a face to that abuser too, because everybody deserves
and get to
freedom,
the root and understand why why we do what we do, why we behave the way we do. Is just get down there to the root.
I was that girl that I literally wrote Jeffrey Dahmer. Literally wrote him and said, I know you're not going to hear this from a lot of people, but God died for you too. And if you repent from your sins and ask for forgiveness, the truth is, we don't like to say that, but it is still the truth. God will forgive you too. And that's me in my heart of hearts for both people, for the victims and the perpetrators, to understand that God died for them too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's a wrap.
I think that's a wrap.
And thank you for watching. If there's some topic or discussion that you would like to have a conversation on, then you can reach out to me on Instagram at Shelly256, and that's Shelly, Chellie 256. The voices of 256 Huntsville. Yes. Maybe we can come up with something like that.
That would be nice.